I want to encourage you that holding on to God is worth far more than anything this world could offer, and that God should be the foundation of your life. As we stand, let me pray. Father God, thank you that you are a God who speaks. Please help us this evening to hear your voice and move our hearts to be obedient to what you say. We pray this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Please do take a seat, and if you could grab one of the pew Bibles and have that open in front of you at that passage from Romans 1 that Thomas read earlier on in the service for us. Well, can I add my welcome to all new students, and can I also say congratulations. Making it to university in the first place is no mean feat. So congratulations on getting through the endless rewriting of your personal statements, all the revision, all the exam stress, the tearful farewells, and the now seemingly obligatory shopping trip to IKEA with your parents when you see the state of your accommodation. University is brilliant. It has so much to offer. It'll stretch your mind, it'll teach you lots about yourself, not to mention the subject you're studying, I hope, and it could well give you friends for life. But it could also tempt you into making a shocking exchange. An exchange a little like the one I'm about to offer to you right now. I have a £20 note here, and I'm willing to offer it to all of you good folks for just 50 pence. This is a genuine £20 note and a genuine offer. £20 for just 50p. Who wants to take me up on this offer? Hands first, fastest finger first. Yep, okay, where's my runner? Pete, can you get that to, I think it was Tom Hicks there, has got his 50 pence. Oh, he's going to give me shrapnel. It's all bits and pieces. Okay, right. Tom's happy with his £20. I've got my 50 pence. Now, why on earth would I do that? I'm a Scotsman, so I don't part with money easily. I work for a church too, so I don't exactly have money to burn. That's a ridiculous swap, isn't it? Ridiculous. And yet it's just the kind of exchange we find in that Bible passage we have for tonight in Romans 1. It's just the kind of shocking exchange that we find going on in the culture around us this day. Did you see that as Thomas read Romans 1 for us? Verse 23, they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images. Verse 25, they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. The world around us is constantly making this exchange, trading in the most important person, the most valuable relationship, the greatest treasure on earth, just for something else. Exchanging the worship of the glorious, true and living God for worship of ourselves, performing the moral and spiritual equivalent of swapping a £20 note for 50 pence. And our world invites us in to make exactly that same kind of dubious deal. So as many of you plunge headlong into the great joys and opportunities of university life, I want to lovingly warn you, urge you, not to end up making this shocking exchange for yourselves. It can happen so easily. And so I want to encourage you that holding on to God is worth far more than anything this world could offer, and that God should be the foundation of your life at any time, not least as you start your university life. And Romans 1 encourages us to do just that beautifully, as it tells us firstly that we all have a sneaking suspicion about God. We all have a sneaking suspicion. Have a look back with me at verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. One of the tricky things about Freshers Week is getting to know people. I mean, you meet loads and loads of people, but it's hard often to get beyond those three classic Freshers questions. I'm sure you know them. What's your name? Where do you come from? What are you studying? Every conversation seems to begin like that, as if it's some kind of bizarre tribal ritual. And after a week of that, you can feel like you're only just beginning to scratch the surface with people. But pop round to someone's room or be invited round to someone's house and they start to open up to you as you start checking out their posters or their bookshelves, or you have a nosy around their CD collection or their DVD collection. I love doing that. I don't know about you. But as you do that, you get to know a bit more about them. And the Apostle Paul is saying here in Romans 1 is that if you live in God's world, you should notice marks of his ownership and personality everywhere. Did you get that as we read it? Paul is saying that since the beginning of the world, the reality of God has been on public display. God's invisible qualities have been available for everyone to see in his creation. So even though we can't physically see God tonight, and I can't kind of present him to you stage left, the universe we see tells us a lot about our Creator. For instance, take the size of the universe. In 1990, the Hubble telescope was sent up into space and sent back these amazing pictures that show that the universe is way bigger than we ever thought. They discovered that the universe is 92 billion light years across. And not only that, they discovered that in that great expanse of space, there are over 350 billion galaxies out there. It's mind-boggling. And it makes you ask, why would God create all these galaxies that generations of people never saw or even knew existed before Hubble went up? Do you think that was maybe so that we would stop and say, wow, God is unfathomably big? Now let's flip it. From the ridiculously big to the infinitesimally small. And think with me about the detail of creation. Like, do you know about the bombardier beetle? It keeps two different chemicals in tubes in its tail. And when it feels threatened, it sends these chemicals into a chamber where an enzyme is added, causing an explosion that fires a 212-degree jet out of its backside towards its enemies while also propelling itself away. It's amazing. Random chance would never have produced the bombardier beetle. And neither would it have produced the uniqueness of every single one of those billions of unique snowflakes that fall each year. Or your own heart, which generates enough blood as it pumps throughout your body that it could squirt blood 30 feet into the air. I've never personally tried that. And I wouldn't encourage you to do that either. But the intricacy of creation is just as breathtaking as the splendor of it. Every star is an announcement. The glaciers are megaphones. The clouds are banners, all shouting out to us, God is there. The more we look, the more we see that all things in creation act as continual reminders, like pop-up boxes on the internet, jumping out at us to remind us of verse 20, his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature. And as we look at the breathtaking majesty of the Grand Canyon or the hardiness of penguins skittering around in the Antarctica, whether in the flesh or on a BBC documentary, we are supposed to stand in awe and worship. We are supposed to see the fingerprints of our Creator and seek him out. That's what Paul says in Acts 17, verse 27. He says that God made people so that they should seek God, in the hope that they might feel their way towards him and find him. And that's the command of the Bible time and time and time again. Seek the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul. which might get you thinking that this just confirms what many folks say, that God is hiding and we have to play some kind of ridiculous celestial game of hide and seek in order to find him. But this is like playing hide and seek with my kids. I don't know if you've ever played hide and seek with small children, but it's ridiculous. It goes kind of like this. I sit at the kitchen table and count to 10 while they rush out into the garden to hide. When I get to 10, I jump up and I go out into the garden. Lucy, our eldest, will have hidden behind the wheelie bin because it's the only place you can get right in behind in our entire garden. It's the only decent hiding space. Jamie will be standing behind a bush with at least one, if not two, limbs sticking out from behind it. While Kate, our youngest, will be standing in the middle of the garden trying to keep very, very still. Because if she stays completely still, then I can't see her. Hide and seek is so easy when you play with little kids. And God has not made it hard for us to find him. Creation is like the limbs sticking out from behind a bush, like a signpost to our Creator. Our consciences are like the wheelie bin that begs to be looked behind because we know we have this nagging feeling there must be just something behind there. While Jesus stands in the middle of all history, in the middle of the garden of all human history, making everything much, much, much more obvious. We all have a sneaking suspicion that God is there. We all do. So the question becomes, why don't we all believe? Why doesn't everyone believe? Well, that's the second thing that Paul says here. Secondly, we suppress the truth about God. Let's have a look at those verses from 18 to 20. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Don't know if you've ever done that little experiment where you've been in the pool or at the beach and you've got hold of a ball and you try to hold it under the water and you hold it, but it just keeps popping back up. It just won't stay down. And that's what makes it such a great challenge, as those unwilling to admit defeats quite so easily then try to lie on the ball, putting the full weight of their body on it to stop it popping up. Or they stand on the ball thinking if they can push it down really, really deep, then it won't come back. But it does. And in my experience, that's the point where folks usually give up and start trying to do that kind of thing with somebody else's head. That's what tends to happen in the pool. And Paul is saying that that's what folks do with the truth about God. God is revealing himself. He sends messages about himself, but we suppress the truth. Even though we know that God is there, we try to tuck that knowledge deep down under the surface. Why? Is it because the evidence for God in the universe is not intellectually credible? No, that's not it. The probability of the universe we see coming about by blind chance is tiny. You've probably heard lots of quotes about that. Here's just one. Paul Davies is a non-Christian professor of physics here in the UK, and he writes that the probability of the universe existing as it is the same as aiming at a target 1 inch wide on the other side of the observable universe and hitting it. I'm not sure if I could hit a target at the other end of this church, let alone the other end of the universe, whether with my arm or probably slightly more accurately with some kind of weaponry. Let's face it, intellectual credibility is merely an excuse, not the answer to why folks don't believe. Did you see that there in verse 18? People want to live without reference to God. That's the ungodliness bit. So as to do their own thing, which is the unrighteousness bit. So rather than seek God as they should, they suppress whatever knowledge that's available to them. Which is why the great atheistic debaters like Richard Dawkins and Stephen Hawking are so popular. It's not because the signs of God's existence and activity in the world are not clear enough. It's that they are utterly inconvenient if folks want to live as they please. As Aldous Huxley, the influential 20th century thinker, put it, I had reason for not wanting the world to have a meaning. Consequently, I assumed it had none. The person who many called the founder of modern agnosticism based his view of the world on actually running away from the truth. Do you see? We are not prepared to let God control how we live. So Paul says that it's not that we can't believe, it's that we won't believe. And in the next few verses, he shows us how that works out in practice. Verse 21, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. Paul says we don't glorify God, which essentially means that we can't stand God being the center of our lives. God's glory literally means his heaviness, his weightiness, his significance. Yet we make him lightweight, insignificant. That's what the Bible calls sin. You see, sin isn't just doing bad things. It's closing our eyes to the signposts of God's creation in existence. God's existence in creation. It's ignoring our God-given consciences and rejecting the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and then making excuses not to believe. Everyone has some knowledge of God, but has ignored it. It's not that we can't find out the truth about God, but we suppress it. It's not that we are honest seekers after God, but deliberate hiders from God. And I wonder tonight, are you hiding from God? Are you hiding from God? Well, if we suppress the truth, we will also thirdly and finally receive God's judgment. We suppress the truth and therefore we receive God's wrath, which might have been the main thing that stood out from you as we've read out verse 18 throughout the night. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Did you get that? God is angry. And as soon as I mentioned that, as soon as it was read, maybe you went, no. God can't be angry. Maybe he did get a bit of a rage on in the Old Testament, but he's got his act together and cleaned it up since then. He's hired some public relations guys to help spin his image in a more positive light. It's a bit troubling to think about God being angry, isn't it? But God's anger is not like ours. This isn't God seeing red. He doesn't lose his temper or fly off the handle like we do. No. God's anger is his settled, controlled, totally fair, right anger against sin and the consequences of sin. For a righteous God is right to be angry against all that is wrong. It's the kind of anger that you or I maybe feel about the headlines we see of TV presenters abusing their position, taking advantage of their position to abuse young girls, or the atrocities that we've seen recently done by ISIS. It's right to be angry about what is wrong in the world because we know the hurt and the pain that hide behind those stories. And God's anger is part of what makes the gospel such good news. Yes, that's right. God's anger is good news. When it comes to sin, he doesn't just sit back on his rocking chair and pretend nothing has happened like a kindly old grandfather handing out Werther's originals. No, it is good that we have a God who gets angry. It shows that he cares about what he's made. If you care about something, it matters, doesn't it? If you don't care, then, well, it's obvious. It just doesn't matter to you. And God's anger is not a contradiction of his love. It's an expression of it. God loves his children, so he hates what destroys them. It means he loves you, and he hates what you become when you turn away from him. So the question is not, how could a loving God be angry? But rather, how could a loving God feel anything less? Yet God's anger is not quite what we'd expect. Look again more closely at verse 18. The wrath of God, that settled right anger, is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Sure as Romans chapter 2 tells us, there will be a day of judgment. as the Lord Jesus comes to wrap up human history and pronounce the final verdict on our lives and his judgment on everyone who's ever lived. But until that time, the wrath of God is being revealed, as we can experience a foretaste of God's just anger right now. Yeah, when we look around, it's hard to see that happening, isn't it? It's a bit like those signs on the motorway that tell you roadworks are going on. And yet you drive past mile after mile after mile of roadworks, of cones out on the motorway, and there are no roadworks happening whatsoever. If God was revealing his anger today, we would expect some action, like lots of CGI special effects going on as laser beams rain down from heaven. We put a foot out of line. Kazam! God zaps us. And all that's left is a pair of smouldering shoes on the pavement. But Paul speaks about something very different to that here. God displays his anger by giving us what we want. We suppress the truth about God and receive his wrath as he hands us over to our own desires. That's Paul's constant refrain in the verses that follow. We suppress the truth of God's glory and do our own thing. Therefore, verse 24, God gave them up in the lusts of our hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. We trade in God's truth for a lie, and verse 26, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women. We hit the delete button on our knowledge of God. And verse 28, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. Astonishingly, God's anger in the present lets us do what we want. When we insist on ignoring him, living as we want, God gives us over to the consequence of ignoring him as a foretaste of his judgment. He says, okay, have it your way. Live in that kind of world where you do as you please. And so behind the facade of the party scene on campus, in extreme cases, we get STDs and unwanted pregnancies, and alcohol addiction and liver disease. But we've also got the constant undermining of self-image and self-esteem that sees folk go along with all kinds of things they don't necessarily want to do because it's the way to fit in, to make friends, to get along. And every year we have the irony of thousands of students trading in their newfound freedom in order just to follow the crowd. And Romans 1 warns us that what the world wants to invite us into is under God's judgment. And it asks us, why would you want to throw yourself into that? As verse 29 goes on to describe more of what the world that ignores God looks like. And it's a snapshot of humanity in decline, of human society going down the plug hole. And this shouldn't surprise us, because if we're going to be anti-God, then because of that we'll also be anti-social. If we don't love God, the end result will be that we don't love the people he has made in his image. And we mustn't be surprised then when this world is unjust and unloving, as this is what happens when we turn our back on the God who is love and justice. And when we switch on the news or open up the paper and we see wars or famine or poverty, or when a friend gets close to us and is just genuinely honest about the pain and hurt of a broken relationship or a bad night out, or the anxiety or shock of something even worse, or when we ourselves feel the effects of our sin or others, we shouldn't think, oh, isn't the world just a terrible place? No, we should think, isn't God angry? Isn't God patiently let us see the consequences of our own actions here? You see, the pain and suffering of our world is like a billboard advertising the consequences of life lived without God. So why do I mention all this? To depress you? I hope not. Out of smugness? No. As if it was about them out there and not us. No, not that either. And it's not out of grumpy old age, as if everything was better when I were a lad. I mention it all because these words were written out of hope, not despair. They were written because, well, how could you see this and keep quiet about it? They're written because the writer has good news even for this situation. We listen to this ugly truth so that we can receive the beautiful one of the good news of God's generous rescue in Jesus Christ. Read the rest of Romans if you've never done that for yourself. Do it this week while you've got time on your hands, fresh as week. Read it and you will discover that great good news. So if you've pitched up in Newcastle as a believer, let me encourage you to stand firm on these truths. That's tough in a culture that makes sin look normal and living to please God look odd. But it's worth it, and there are many who need you to do that, not just for yourselves, but because they need to see the danger that they are in. And we want to help and support you in making that kind of stand, not least by encouraging you to join with us for Focus on Tuesday nights so that we can help you discern God's truth in the Bible from the lies of the world that you're encountering out there. And if you've pitched up here as someone who doesn't believe, then can I encourage you to check out the claims of Jesus himself? The best way to do that is through one of our Christianity Explored courses, and you've got a leaflet about that in your service papers. We've got one starting for students on Sunday, the 19th of October. But if you can't make that one, then do talk to one of the team, and we'd be delighted to sort you out with something else that could help you explore that and ask your questions. Well, let me finish with another offer to you. I have 50 pence. Would anybody like to trade that for £20? Anyone? Or let's be honest, £1,000, 2,000, £1 million. Because that's more what it's like, the shocking exchange that we're so tempted into in our culture, and our culture invites us into. Of course you wouldn't want to make that exchange, so don't make that even more ridiculous exchange of trading a relationship with the God of all heaven and earth for anything else, no matter how tempting it looks at the time. His fingerprints are clearly seen throughout the created order. So don't suppress the truth and receive God's judgment. Instead, worship him as you were made to do. Let me pray that we'd do that right now. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for your word. And we prayed just a short while ago, we sung just a short while ago, asking that your Holy Spirit would cause this word to come alive in us. And so we want to pray that again. Father, pray that you would help us to see these things as the truth that they are, to understand them as the reality of Freshers Week, the reality of campus, the reality of our world, that we would be careful not to get sucked in, to treasure you more than anything else in the world, and to encourage others to see your preciousness and the glory of the life that you want to give them in you. We pray all of that in Jesus' name. Amen.